Terrible. Would not, 10 of 10 would not recommend.
An incel wrote this and was like, is there anybody else out there?
Or incels written by incels.
You think it's gonna go somewhere with that? Like that's the start off of a great relationship?
He's totally insecure and doesn't have any redeeming personality traits, and constantly blames all of his lacking on other people, and this builds into resentment for the opposite sex, and it just ends up being a total like clusterfuck of how bad he can like twist and manipulate his problems to be other people's fault.
Now, the one thing I would say that this manhwa might have done right, from my personal perspective, is that it does feel realistic in the sense that this is like, there are people like this. This is something that I would believe someone wrote as like an autobiography.
Exactly. It like that was
Yeah, it's pretty damn real.
It is, and that
Yeah.
was, to me, that was the scariest fucking thing, was reading it, and it's like, as soon as you start reading it and you start looking at this, at first you're like, no, and then immediately you're like, wait, I have either met someone like this, or I've read comments like this, and you know these people exist.
You know how he's constantly, you get these like text messages throughout the whole entire series where he's like talking to this dude, right? Just talk shit.
Mhm.
But it's like more of like,
Yeah.
it's basically his inner thoughts. It's just him talking to himself. It's basically just him talking to himself. That's the way I saw it. I don't know how y'all saw it.
Mhm.
That would make more sense because they never showed who the hell it was on the other side.
Exactly. 'Cause
Well,
I
yeah.
think that's that's like his true incel texting him back and egging him on to do what he does throughout the series. And it doesn't help
do
that
think
he's
the writing-
isolated by himself.
I do think the writing was at least okay. The writing isn't what made this a bad story for me. What made this a bad story for me was just how much I hated the protagonist.
the thing, all I'm gonna say is, I kind of agree on the guy he was texting, and I want to know what the message they were trying to get across was.
Anyone who's gonna go read this, I'm gonna say what the end is right now. So go read this if you feel like you need to torture yourself for some reason.
Spoiler alert.
Otherwise,
It's not even
yeah,
that long.
Yeah,
yeah,
you'll
okay.
finish it in like
Huge-
15 minutes.
It's not even that long. A huge spoiler alert. It ends with him basically just sobbing to himself, and this guy's like, "Yo, you're a grown ass man. Why you crying in public? What's wrong with you?" He's just like starts crying harder. He's like, "Oh, you think I'm pathetic too, huh?" And it just shows him getting on a bus and leaving, and that's the end. And it's like, yeah, no, and when
worst
that happened,
ending.
when it just ended with like the bus, you just see the bus leaving. I'm like, yo, is this a true story? It's unlikely the author wrote this about himself because like,
Yeah.
yo, how would you admit to this level of like just awfulness? Like, I don't even want to say degeneracy because I'm a degenerate, but I'm not this.
He or she has had direct contact with someone who is like this, but it's interesting to me because I don't think you could write this like as you feel like this, because it's not wrote this, if someone who felt this way, like if someone who actually shared the same train of thought as him wrote this, it wouldn't play out the way it does, because it would actually be justified because they would think that they're on the right, like it would be manipulation. They either had to write this later, or they had to do it based on an experience with someone, because like as the story's written, like it's obvious that it's wrong.
I don't think it's an autobiography because honestly, incels can't admit when they're wrong or when they've done something wrong because it's everybody else's fault, not theirs. It's the woman's fault, not theirs. And you know, how dare you not say thank you when I open the door for you? You know, like
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Now,
gotta
I
be
don't want to
something
paint.
else.
I don't want to paint the women in this series as like some absolutely perfect icons of what you should be. 'Cause that's definitely not the case. But they were leagues above on a moral level than any of the male characters.
Absolutely.
On top of that, like, I do think, like, if somehow the author found this video or something, I do want to say my compliments to the author for making it absolutely feel realistic, because that does take a good level of skill in writing a story. This felt like something that could have happened, and you know, the fact that we can have the conversation as to whether or not this is a biography for someone that the author knew or not, the fact that we can have that conversation does mean that the author had a decent level of skill in writing this.
If you read this and it pisses you off, and you actually do kind of want to understand where some of this is coming from, go back and look at School Days because I think it's very similar.
I think the most
Go ahead.
conflicting part about the main character, I think, was when he was drunk and he said that stuff to what was her name? The chick with the glasses from his class.
Oh.
I think that when we found out that moment, I was like, oh no. That was it, dude. That was the end of the story. Like they could have cut it off right there, and I was like, yo, I can't follow this guy anymore. I was like, yo, I kind of felt where he was a little bit. Like I understand where his thought process was throughout the whole series. But at this point, I was like, yo, you kind of messed up, boy. And it was like, damn, that was my worst moment for him. That's for sure. Because also at that point, I think that was the same part, like time when he was thinking like, yeah, I think I actually like this girl, right? And he was like, yeah,
Yeah.
maybe I'll actually try to ask her out or something like that. And then he got drunk and then he fucked it up. I was like, no, dude, you can't not do that. That's unacceptable, man.
And that's part of the problem is if you have that toxic mindset to where you're thinking these things, even if you're not acting them, if you're thinking these things with people in your life and blaming all your problems on other people, eventually it's gonna come out because you're gonna slip. You know, you're gonna drink a little too much, or maybe you're gonna be really tired. You haven't gotten sleep in a long time. Someone's gonna say something that's gonna trigger you. Something's gonna come out. So you really need to think about not only the way that you act, but the way that you think, which is
Yeah.
where this protagonist really messed things up.
It's scary. That's the scariest part is that there's actually people out there that think like this, and there's actually like people that will read this and take it heart and take it the wrong way because there's just stupid people out there
Yeah.
I'm kind of dumb sometimes, but I'm not like completely stupid where and gullible in that sense. But no, it's messed up. It's kind of interesting too to see the point of view of them, what they're thinking, so then you can kind of understand them a little better.
The worst part for me was actually the end. And the reason I say the end is because, like, I think that last scene with him on the bus was actually pretty symbolic because you have this old man, okay, on the bus. And I think it's actually really important that the man is old, okay? Like, he's obviously an older man, he's not just an adult ordeal. And the reason I bring this up is because he basically looks at him and is like, "Wow, you're disgusting. You're like how old and you were crying in public." And for me, the real tragedy of this story was not everything that happened along the way. It was that he never actually learned by the end, because like Plato has an awesome like line that apparently he said, and it was, "We can forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when men are afraid of the light." And that's kind of what I get from the story, is that this guy that we're following is obviously mentally ill, and his idea of social like connections and meaningful relationships is twisted and distorted, but it's partially because he never became a man. He's a child. A lot of the male guys in the series were shit, but I don't think they were shit for the sake of being shit. They were shit. They were shit to be a plot device for him, because he constantly looked at them and thought that he was the better male. Like he looked at himself in this righteous light and thought, "Well, I am so awesome and I do everything right." And
Because he's
these
comparing
guys just
himself
wanna
to like people who are basically rapists. Like,
yeah,
it's like-
basically.
But when you compare yourself to like shitty human beings, of course you're gonna come out looking a little bit shinier than shit. So
yeah,
Yep.
and he does. Like, he's not the worst person in the series. He's just pathetic. I hope an incel can read this and take away from it everything that he does and how awful it goes for him, and maybe this series has the redeeming feature and it can teach incels the lessons of how bad shit gets for incels. Don't do it, man. Make yourself better. Don't be this guy.
I just
yeah.
hope if an incel sees whatever video this is gonna go in Kaihen, I just hope that they like, if you read it, that's fine. But if you've heard any of this and like you don't think we're totally crazy, and you look how you look at the manga and you can relate to any of it, just quit and go get help, because it's not natural and you need help,
You don't get help,
It-
you're never gonna be a better person.
basically.
well, also don't.
Facts.
If you break down and you feel like you're like if you relate to this guy and the fact that you can't form a relationship or you have these issues, stop feeling bad about it and go fix it.
Yep.
Don't feel bad
you
about
wanna
it.
see.
Stop. If you just sit in your own like self-pity and get depressed about how awful you are, like he walks away from the series going like, oh, you think I'm pathetic too. He gets on a bus and he leaves. Throughout the whole series, he never did a single thing right. So
No.
don't end things by running away from your problems. Fix them.
Thank you for watching. I'd like to take a brief minute to thank my patrons, Maltar, Justin, and Brenda. You guys have been great, and I really appreciate the support. But I'd also like to thank my subscribers. Thank you for hitting that red button. I hope that I can make you guys happy. If there's anything you guys want to see in my videos, I'll read it, and we can figure out how to make my content something you can enjoy more. Thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time on the way down the abyss.